Welcome to Lessons That Last, where a researcher and a teacher talk about what it means to make a lasting impact on students' lives. They unpack the stories former students shared about their memorable teachers and discuss how we can all make a greater impact on the people in our lives. Here's Julie and Laura.
Hello, and welcome to the Lessons That Last podcast. I'm Julie Hassan, professor, researcher, and with me is my festive co-host,
Laura Estes Swilly, and I am a teacher and a writer, and also, I forgot to mention this last week, I'm a grandmother.
That's right. We didn't talk about that on the pod.
We did not. My husband's daughter had our first grandchild on Thanksgiving Day, and it was amazing. It was amazing.
Weeny little turkey.
Yes, he is my favorite turkey.
Oh, so cute. And now you have to tell the deets, the weight, because he was a tiny little
He was
turkey.
tiny. He was 5 pounds, 12 ounces, and he was down to 5'5" when he went home because, you know, they lose weight. And so she keeps telling me, we're focused on gaining weight. And I was like, never, ever have we uttered those words in our family. So it's so exciting. And he is just the sweetest baby. I've been around a lot of babies and I love a newborn. I know a lot of people get a little freaked out about newborns, but I love them. And he just is a sweet little cooing, little gassy, smiling sweetness. Yeah,
he's
good.
Need to sometimes sniff a baby head.
Yes, the baby head.
But you know, if you do that with strangers in public, it makes the mamas nervous.
Yeah, they don't want to share that because it's like it's a commodity.
Oh, little Thanksgiving blessing, and we're heading into the holidays, and that will be fun with a new baby. And I love the story you picked for us tonight. I love it. But it's one that just, hits me right in the feels.
Whoa, deep feels. I was almost hoping that we could have a special guest read it for us.
A guest reader.
Yes.
Where is Grandpa Swilly? Maybe he would step in.
Yeah, no. This would wreck him.
Oh, I was reading this and I was thinking, we have not had a snow yet this year. We had flurries in Boone last week. I want to say Tuesday, out my office window, just sort of like floating by in the air. Nothing that stuck or really did anything once it hit the ground. But we have not had a snow this year, and now we're into December. And sometimes it starts to snow here in like late October.
Wow.
But no snow. So it sounds like there's a possibility this week. So this story had me thinking about that. And also thinking about last December, right around Christmas Eve, when we got below freezing for a few days and the pipes froze.
I remember.
I have never been so cold. And of course, I've spent 50 years in Florida. Mm-hmm. And I was not built for below zero.
Right.
No.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I was actually going to assure you that we also have not had snow this year in Florida.
And Central Florida. What's up with that?
It's crazy. We did have last week some nice cold weather. I got to wear 2 sweaters.
Sweater weather.
It was exciting. And then it went right back up into the mid 80s with high humidity.
Oh.
But that's okay. We take it when we can get it. And there's more coming this week. It makes me feel festive.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah. We've had cold here. Like we were 18 degrees one morning last week.
Wow.
We just haven't had snow. Like it's been plenty cold. A little up and down. Everything, leaves are all off the trees. Everything is definitely brown.
You're snow ready.
We're snow ready. I had a couple pumpkins still sitting out from Thanksgiving. Ready to like cut them up in the yard for all the creatures. Mm-hmm. And one of the deer must have somehow gotten that pumpkin open a little bit because they munched it all day. So
Aw.
it's winter.
Oh.
Usually they're not into the pumpkin. They're looking for sweeter things. But all day they ate on that pumpkin. So it's winter and they're looking for something to eat.
I miss the deer. I love the deer. We had deer behind us. There's a giant, huge pasture behind us, which is now a cow pasture. But before it was a peach grove. And it was just rows of peach trees as far as you could see.
Love peaches.
And we would stand on the back porch and just watch very quietly the deer stealing the peaches and eating the leaves. And then when they saw us, they would start leaping around. And it was such a wonderful, like, I didn't know that I cared about wildlife until I moved here into the, sort of middle of nowhere. And I really miss the deer. Now the cows are there, the deer don't really come around very often.
Oh,
yeah.
Ours, if we don't have the deer corn out by 8, they're looking like into the kitchen window.
I love that.
Are you? You're late with breakfast.
That's so cute.
Fun. And our neighbors who hunt, I think, are, really excited that we
they're happy.
We fatten these deer up. Mostly they're mamas and babies, like mostly does and babies.
That's good. So they're not getting hit. So
we
they're good.
had one big, like 4-point buck. Buck.
Buck. It's a buck.
4-point buck in the yard last week. And he must be very elusive to still be around, but he was gorgeous and huge. And
was he?
Yeah, just moved through the yard, and all of those other ones just kind of parted and let him eat his fill.
I was thinking with 4 points, maybe he wasn't as big, because isn't that an indication of age or something like that?
It is, but for here, like, we just don't see them that big.
Yeah.
And he was beautiful. So that's the only time we've seen. And most of them are either, mamas with babies, or they're really young bucks with the little tiny antlers. But he was pretty, and he put away some corn. So feeding all the creatures with winter coming. Like, we're all putting on our layer of fat.
Yeah, you got to make it through. We're doing that here, and it's 80. So
us and little grandbaby Swilly over here. So this story about a girl who moved from Florida to Wisconsin, and can imagine how cold it must get in Wisconsin. I think as we're recording this, we're recording on a Sunday evening. The Green Bay Packers game is on tonight, and it looks like snow there. It looks super cold there. So I'm just imagining how cold it must get in Wisconsin.
Yeah. And my cousin, Kathy, moved from Florida to Wisconsin as she might have been between 25 and 30, with her husband and 2 kids, and raised those kids in Wisconsin. So she did that journey of growing up in Florida and then becoming a Wisconsin girl and actually learning about seasons and snow. And I think she loved it, except for the snow. I think it gets a little extra cold there, but the seasons are so beautiful.
And the snow is great if you're inside and you don't have to go anywhere, except maybe crunch down the road a little bit, and play. But when you have to go to work or you have to travel, it gets a little...
Yeah, that's what worries me all the time about the snow is, don't you have to go to work? Don't you have to open the store? Don't you have to teach the schools? Don't you have to do all the things? And that seems like a deterrent.
Well, and typically here at App State, if it snows so much that they're having trouble keeping the roads clear, then classes will all go remote. Like, people won't go onto campus. But if it's snowing just a little, they'll salt the roads and it'll melt pretty quick on the road, and you'll just drive carefully in your 4-wheel drive.
I got to be honest with you. The drive from your house out to the main road, I can't remember the name of it, is scary enough. without ice and snow for a Floridian who's not used to those switchbacks, and the mountainous roads and the narrow roads. It's scary enough. I can't imagine it in the snow.
It's a little curvy. But if it's not a big snow and it's melting pretty good, it's all right. You get used to it. I think that's the thing, right? You get used to wherever you land for a while.
Yes.
It takes a little time, but you get used to it. So this sweet woman who wrote us this story, Nora, about her third grade teacher, was talking about moving from Florida to Wisconsin.
Yeah, and just like not necessarily being prepared, because that's what you're saying.
Right.
Once you're used to it and you're prepared, it's okay. You can make it work. The problem is, what if you're not prepared?
Yeah. And Brian says that to me all the time when I'm saying, I don't want to go to the football game, or I can't go here. It's going to be this temperature, or it's going to be too cold. And he'll always say, but we have clothes for that. We're not out in our Daisy Dukes, we're not out in our shorts. Right. We've got clothes for that.
Yeah.
But when you first get somewhere, you've got to accumulate all of those clothes. Right. And that takes a little time.
I bet.
To even know what you need, or, kind of gauge how heavy the layers need to be.
Exactly. Because I think probably I have no idea what layering is for actual winter. No clue. Mm-hmm. Because we have sometimes easily a 30-degree weathered shift, where it's in the 50s in the morning and in the 80s in the afternoon. And so there's a lot of layering and focus on that. But I can't imagine what you do for 0 to 15-degree weather. It boggles my mind. So as a lifelong Floridian, I definitely feel Nora's adjustment.
And I know for me, like, there was a time when I worried about looking cute, but once you get, the sweaters and the boots and the coats and all that are fun. But once you get a temperature that's cold enough, you just don't care about cute.
I believe
all
that.
You
and
want
the hats
to be is dry and warm.
Yeah, I believe it.
Wrapped
totally.
Like up except for your eyeballs in a scarf and just trying to be dry and warm. But you have to have all those things. And so this story really spoke to me about having what you need.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking about our role as teachers when we're trying to teach kids academics and they have these physical needs.
Yes.
Whether they're hungry or they're cold or, whatever it is that's happening. How do we teach them when their needs aren't met, and what is our role in that, and how do we even find the resources for them?
Exactly.
But this teacher somehow knew, even though this little girl acted like she was fine, somehow knew she was cold and figured out how to provide that.
Yeah, it's not hard to see through the act when you're a teacher sitting at that vantage point of life knowledge and understanding and experience.
Yeah. And I always think, if you've ever been hungry, you recognize a hungry kid. And if you've ever been cold, you probably recognize a cold kid. So, So would you, Laura, read Nora's story about her third grade teacher, Mrs. Rhett, for us?
Okay, so I will try. I am already having feelings.
You can do this.
I can do it. I can do hard things. My family moved from Florida to Wisconsin when I was in third grade. My father had been out of work for a while, and my uncle helped him find a job there. We moved in August, but by November, the weather turned chilly. Coming from Florida, I didn't have clothes suitable for Wisconsin winter weather, and my family couldn't afford new clothes. I remember being so cold. My teacher, Mrs. Rhett, must have noticed because she showed up at my door. one afternoon with a coat, sweaters, and boots in my size. I was so excited to see her and to have warm clothes. It's still the sweetest surprise I've ever had. I didn't have to pretend I wasn't cold anymore, and I looked like the other kids. Mrs. Rhett's kindness made me feel loved, and she helped me feel like I belonged in my new town. I'm forever grateful for her kindness.
Oh, sweet Mrs. Rhett.
Oh,
Wow.
what a beautiful woman. What a beautiful story.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and this little third grader who was cold and
Yeah.
in a new place and trying to pretend she fit in.
To pretend like she's too cool to be cold. Like,
right.
yeah, I think that's what you do, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You try to act like I'm okay, and then someone figures out you're not.
Yeah.
Right. And that someone so often is a teacher.
Yes.
And somehow these great teachers figure out when a kid's not okay and find a way to help. And that's what she did.
Yeah. And yeah, I was thinking about that this week on a couple of different levels. How sometimes we have to shake a lot of trees to find help for kids. I think that for most of us, or a lot of us, the days of showing up at a kid's house with a coat are probably gone. There's so many security concerns and layers of things. But we have to still make it happen. And how do we make it happen? And so we just start shaking trees until somebody says, okay, stop shaking. We will take care of this.
You'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a principal, I had a couple of really great social workers.
Yeah.
Who somehow figured out how to get kids what they need. And a couple of great guidance counselors, but still so often it was teachers who filled those gaps and figured out how to do that for kids. Yep. How many teachers do we know who still have a drawer full of snacks?
Correct. Yes. I do. Right. And other people in my hallway do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a girl, I think it was last year or the year before, who I don't know, she just always seemed to be out of her class during my conference period. And during my conference period, my door would be propped open because I can get some air that way. It's very hot in my classroom all the time.
Because you are not in Wisconsin.
I am not in Wisconsin, and I do not have working air condition. And this young woman would stop in my doorway and just chat with me. And one day said, "Do you have any food? I'm hungry." And I said, "I actually do." And I gave her food. And then she came back and she always needed food and she was always hungry. And it struck me, I think my conference period was either fifth or sixth period. So after lunch, almost the end of the day. And I always wondered, like, what was she not getting at lunch that she needed? But I never even really knew. I didn't ever know her last name. I never knew who her teacher was. She didn't want to tell me because she was probably inappropriately out of class. And so I just took her as I found her and nurtured her where we were. And we had a relationship based on I'm hungry and I had food.
Oh, yeah. And somehow trusted you enough to let you know.
Yep.
You look like a kind soul.
Yes.
And someone who wouldn't judge. And that's part of it, isn't it? We're so afraid when we need something, I think, especially kids, of being judged.
Yes. And I think that's why she kept me a little bit at a distance, didn't tell me her last name, because she didn't know me. She may never have known my name, Julie. She just knew I was a nice teacher in room 556 who had snacks and was willing to share. So she didn't give me her last name. And I actually have seen that a lot where, they want to keep some things to themselves. Some of the things are not ours to know.
Yeah. Well, I think want to be how they perceive everyone else is, when you're, I know when I taught the little ones, the second graders, there were a couple kids who just really wanted to know, what is it like to bring a lunch that someone packed for you? Like,
Yeah.
I remember I had a little boy, and he would tell me all the time, I wish I had a lunchbox. And I think it was just that, right? Like, what is it like to have a box full of food that someone packed for you?
Yes.
You know? So,
Yeah.
I bought him a lunchbox and put
Of
snacks.
course you did. Of course you did.
I'm like, if that's your dream, sweetness, we
Yes.
can make that happen.
That is a dream we can make happen.
Can do. That is within our reach.
Yes.
But it's so much of that is just wanting to feel like everybody else.
Yes.
Or at least like they perceive.
Right. And actually, this makes me think about from Safe, Seen, and Stretched, John, who wanted to know what it felt like to have nice, clean clothes that were pressed, and he wanted to feel like he was loved, like he imagined those kids were loved.
Yeah.
And it took his teacher noticing that to make that happen.
To know what it's like to have a new shirt,
Yeah.
you know, like he did. And as he perceived, all the other kids did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, we feel the pressure all the time to get those achievement scores up and to master the benchmarks and all of the things. But when we really dig down, it's this, isn't it?
It is. Yes.
But we lose it. I remember, and I know I have said this on the podcast before, but it had to have been about 10 years ago when I was an assistant principal and I was sitting in a training in the district. We were getting ready for state testing, and you always have to go to the training to learn all the new things about packing and unpacking and what you can do and can't do and all the standardized delivery pieces of testing. And I remember our assessment director at the time, you would know him, I won't say his name to protect the guilty. But he said in the district, we were going to be having free breakfast and free snacks for all kids so that, here's the quote, we know that kids do better when they've eaten. So we're going to feed them so they will do better on the test.
That's why we're feeding them.
And I just, it didn't sit right with me. No. And I remember turning to my friend Jan next to me and saying, why can't we feed kids just because we care that they're hungry? Mm-hmm. Why is this a means to an end?
Right.
And I still that still just doesn't sit right with me. Mm-hmm. I remember, like, it was one of those things that I remember where I was sitting in that meeting and like the sort of the scene, because it bothered me so much that someone would say, well, we're going to feed kids so they will perform better on a test. I was like,
right.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, that's it kind of reminds me of what we were talking about on the last podcast about how policymakers are looking at everything from a bird's eye view. Yeah. And to me, that sounds like a bird's eye view. Well, we need to feed them because they'll do better on tests. They're not thinking about those kids as people. And if you stop for even a minute and think about kids as people, you want to take care of them. It doesn't matter who they are. And so there's an obvious disconnect there.
Yeah. Yes. And for me, a hungry kid, like that's the heartbreak for me is hungry kids.
Hungry kids.
And I never was thank God, never was a hungry kid. And, my own kids were always fed, but certainly have taught a number of kids who had food insecurity. And I know worried about, especially over breaks, like holiday break is coming up, worried about what they were going to eat and what was going to happen over break. So you're right. When you're not in there with them and picking up like Miss Rhett did on the needs that are not always spoken, but they're under the surface and that they're there. or you have a parent who sort of swallows that pride and comes in and asks for help for her kids, their kids.
Yes.
If you're not in the school, in that space, if you're sitting in the district office and your whole job is assessment, maybe you forget. Like,
Yeah.
we'll give him the benefit of that.
Well, I think every once in a while about your experience. I can't remember all the details of being at a conference and you were sitting next to the speaker who was going to be speaking, and you were looking through the book of a data-driven school. Was it a data? And he challenged you on that. Like, is that what should drive a school? And I think about that a lot because so much is about data. And there's such a high focus on numbers, and kids are quantified as numbers, and it makes me so angry every time. And I understand at some point we have to look at numbers. I get that. I'm not a numbers person, but I understand. But I don't think that they're numbers first, right? I was just chatting this afternoon with Caroline, my former TA, who's now at University of Florida studying to someday become a teacher. And she was asking me about my classes. And I have a couple of challenging classes. She was asking about those. And I said, I love them. And it's a choice. It's a choice. Those kids deserve to have someone in their life with expectations of them, boundaries, and love. And I'm choosing to be that person every day. And some days I have to choose multiple times a period, right? But I'm choosing because they need it, and they need to be seen not as numbers, not as test scores, not as difficult students or quiet students or hard to move students or whatever, but as people.
Yeah. The humanness
yes.
of all of us sometimes gets lost.
Yes.
And it's easy to forget. And I think it's a Mother Teresa quote, right? If we judge people, we won't have time to love them.
Yes. Yes.
And
exactly.
so this is the time of year, right? When maybe we push that aside and we see the humanity of all people. And when we see a need, if we're able, we try to do something to help fill that need, and just in an effort to show people that they are loved and important and cared for.
Exactly. That's the also, you brought up Mr. Rogers last week, the idea of look for the helpers. Yes. And I say more, yes, look for the helpers, but also like be a helper. Be one of those people that's in there helping, and people can look for you.
And it's the small things.
Yes.
Like sometimes I think our perception of the needs of people in our country, in our world, is so great that it feels overwhelming. And you think, well, I can't do anything about that. But if we all just did the small things, helped one person.
Person.
I always think about my mom bringing in the trash can for her sick neighbor. I mean, it's that, right?
It matters.
If we all just did those small things for the people around us, that would make ripples of impact beyond what we could ever know.
I agree because when you, and we saw that with an earlier story we looked at in our season 1, young man who was helped by his teacher with food and clean clothes. And then what was he doing? Working at a food bank, helping. Because once you help someone, you give them the tools to then also help others. You inspire them. And we've seen that over and over in these stories, Julie, that you've collected. They were inspired to be their best selves, but then also to help others and to like sort of pay it forward in a way.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And having been the recipient of help, feeling the pride and being able to be the one who then helps.
Yes. Exactly.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, we are winding up season 1
Yay!
of the Lessons That Last podcast. This is our 40th episode,
Awesome.
which is so exciting.
It is exciting.
We started talking about this before the holidays last year and started planning for it
Well, let's be honest,
in
Julie.
January.
You started talking about it.
Okay, I did.
And I needed just some time. We were finishing up the book, and it was such a stressful time with the end of the semester and Christmas and finishing the book. I was like, don't talk to me until February about the pod. And then you sent me a podcast kit, and I was like, okay, well,
I was Santa.
We're not waiting till February. Let's
Santa
go.
sent you that headphones and a microphone.
Yes, exactly. And so I knew that's what we were going to do, because we have always been in it for each other. So if you have an idea, I'm going to go with you. And if I have an idea, you're going to go with me. So this was one of your best ideas yet. I love the podcast. I love talking about it, education and the positive things that are happening in education, and maybe inspiring other people to keep talking about the positives that are in education. This is, I think this is a dream fulfilled for both of us.
Sweet. And just to do brave things, teachers, you are the helpers.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't think our teachers who listen realize how much power they have to make a difference in the world. And I think sometimes we play small. And I've been thinking about that lately too. Why do we resist doing big things that seem a little scary? And I've been resisting lately a couple big things that seem a little scary. And when we really stop and think about what are we afraid of, there's no real danger in putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
I had to finally say to myself, the only thing I'm risking and the only thing that's really scary is I might feel bad if it doesn't work out. Like,
True.
Am I really that afraid of just feeling bad?
That is a risk, and it's a valid risk. We just have to sometimes swallow really, really hard and give it a go.
And be scared and do it anyway.
Yes.
So let's help somebody. Let's do brave things coming up in this new year, because we will be back with you after a little holiday break in mid-January with season 2 of the Lessons That Last podcast. And teachers, we are so grateful for you, for the way you support students, and the difference you make in your own classrooms makes ripples of impact in the whole wide world. So keep making those ripples. Have a great holiday. Have a wonderful new year. We'll see you in January.
I can't wait to see you for season 2, friends.
Yay. Happy holidays.
Bye. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you will subscribe to the Lessons That Last podcast wherever you listen. Give us a rating too, which will help other listeners find us. And don't forget to visit chalkandchances.com for more stories. You can also find more information on Julie's research and books. While you're there, take the quiz to find out what kind of memorable teacher you are. I took it and was surprised by what I found. I think you'll find good food for thought. Let us know about your quiz results. We hope you will meet us here each week and bring a friend to share the conversation.